So welcome everyone. So today we're talking about the bias news, Russian
Propaganda.
and kind of where that narrative comes from. So we'll be looking at perspectives and how disinformation and narratives are skewed kind of to meet the propaganda and the perspective of those telling them. So, we start today with, as you can see here, the good Russian problem. And what does that mean? So that is an attempt by Russia to create the narrative. And so, if you think of spheres of influence, right, who does Russia kind of have helping them, and who continues to vote in favor of
Hollywood.
Russian and yeah, exactly. Sanctions are bad. They're just hurting the people trying to make an honest living and things
David
like
Sachs.
that. So
Yeah.
exactly. So a lot of the people have contracts and stand to profit. Oh, well, there. Don't bother with those sanctions. That's not good. So, the war is bad, but we're not going to say anything bad about Putin, right? Which is inherently contradictory. That's some level of hypocrisy, in my opinion. I don't know what you all think.
Oh God, I'm gonna explode during this recording, dude. This is gonna be rough. In like a place in my life where I need to be very considerate about things I say on the internet now, and this is the topic that we should have done before I just entered this stage of my life. The good Russia problem. Yeah, so this is, I don't know how Artem would term it, and really Artem should be doing most of the talking. I'm just curious as to whether we're considering it a problem, or we're considering it like an impossible paradox, or we're considering it like a theoretical limit in calculus here. So there is this notion that exists. What is the good Russian notion? That not all Russians are bad. Some Russians really don't like the war, and some Russians really don't like the current state of power, and some Russians really don't like the invasion in Georgia and Dagestan and Chechnya and all that stuff. They're out there and they're also suffering. So we should give them empathy. We should give them asylum visas, which is what the United States government does to this day. There should be programs for their support. There should be programs. I mean, there are even professional marketplaces like TopTal. As soon as the war started, they skirted a bunch of Ukrainians and started hiring mostly Russians and Belarusians because of this whole thing, right? So there's this weird sense of like vicarious or second-degree empathy, and they're the victims. And a lot of them play into it, and a lot of them, like a lot of Kremlin sources and people, use it in order to try to create a gray narrative and something that's extremely black and white. And we can talk about that. And we can talk about whether it is possible for a good Russian to exist and in which conditions that should be. I'm mostly going to default to Artem for that. But are we all understanding the good Russian dilemma in the same way? My network's coming in.
There is a dilemma even how to call it, because as you mentioned, if it's a problem or a paradox. So in one case we believe that it's possible to solve, and another case it's just impossible. So
well, does it exist, right? This is almost like a Schrodinger's good Russian sort of like, is this something that can exist until it's observed? That's actually maybe a better way to put it. I like that actually.
Yeah, but even the third term itself sounds a bit weird, because if you followed a bit of the news, you would see like good Russian with the statement they do, or like Kremlin does the statement, and on all the backgrounds, like the good Russian sounds like a fair Nazi, more like, which is paradox itself, something that cannot be true, because like
so the issue is go for it. Sorry.
No, I would just wanted to say that like we have like a full-scale invasion war just live, like it's a Netflix show, and like all the good Russians, so like people with a bit of brain, like they have already had enough of time to take their side, and still the Kremlin and news they still use this notion of good Russian, or use it as a weapon like against the West, because the West is about their like different opinions, where like each one of them matters, but in fact good Russian just a ghost. something that doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah, it's like the Joe Rogan types or like the Elon Musk on X. Like everybody deserves a platform. It's like no. There's some people that don't deserve a platform whose voices should not be amplified at all because of what they do and how they use their power and abuse their power.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So like
Absolutely.
and for context here, also, if you look at all the horrible garbage that's happened in Russia basically since Putin took over, right? There was all these stages where someone with the moral compass, and we can even slightly segue, but where someone with a moral compass would look at what's going on and, protest, speak out. Maybe if things got really nasty, then completely move away and get a different passport. There's lots of spaces here where maybe this is why Americans are of not putting up with power that is BS, and Ukrainians also have a sense of not putting up with power that is BS, and Russians don't. So when you see a video of some Russian woman who lives in Crimea, she's crying because saying, what have we done to deserve this? Why do we need this violence? And that gets amplified on the internet. A lot of people just don't think to say things like, well, why the hell did she move into an occupied territory, right? She had no problems seeing everything that happened and just like going for a beach weekend in a place where the Crimean Tatars got genocided and pushed out to Siberia and everything else, right? So we only see the end reaction of like suffering, not contextualized.
Okay. Why Russians aren't into politics. So one interesting thing, right, is the, I guess, government makeup of, how Russia's existed for the last 25 years, where you had a lot of powerful, oligarchs kind of at the beginning until Putin did a number of reforms, which my understanding was initially kind of popular with a lot of kind of the Russian populace there, but that quickly changed into, not just no oligarchs, but no one, opposing my rule. And so, we've seen a number of high level, influential Russians get killed or, thrown out a window. So I think that's created that kind of climate of fear there where you really just don't say anything bad, and those who do, get disappeared, basically get silenced. And I would say from the perspective of those doing it, the regime, it's been pretty effective. There's been token opposition. Every once in a while, you'll hear someone try and, run, create a candidacy and a campaign, and there's always a legal basis for why they don't get very far. But, to the point too, that's kind of what's happened initially, and that's dissuaded, I think, a lot of young people from really wanting to, take pride and enter public service in that country. And that's why there's been so many people leaving, not just trying to avoid direct conflict, but, brain drain too. Why would I stay here if I can get better opportunities overseas? So, a lot of people sure are looking to avoid the conscription, but, you're probably going to make a better life for yourself somewhere else. So
there's no civil society.
Sure.
There's no civil society there. I mean, like, we take that for granted, but I mean, do a government check across Russia's history. Russia right now is obviously a dictatorship. It is, a single party state. It's controlled by United Russia, which is Vladimir Putin. That's been the case since 2000. Before that, it was Yeltsin. Artem, I don't know what you would want to call that. Steve, and I don't know what you would want to call that. I would call that, at best, a weak, poorly defined, fledgling attempt at something quasi-democratic. It quickly fell apart.
So regarding Yeltsin time, I believe probably the most democratic time for Russian, like the state, but it depends who you're asking. So if we ask some people from Chechnya, so 90s for them were like hell of a time. So that wasn't democratic. They were tricked many times. They got invaded. They were not heard, and the entire world didn't want to listen to them, like at all. Like they don't exist because that was very convenient. Like for the world to just ignore the issue, and the issue started even before, when like everyone ignored it, and Ukraine kind of was tolerant towards that when Russians sent their troops through Ukrainian territory to Moldova, to Transnistria. And it was all Yeltsin, it was not Putin, like that was democratic Russia after the Soviet Union just collapsed. 1992, like a year after collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia sends their troops to Moldova.
So this is, and look, it is conservative estimate then in the last 250-ish years, they've had fewer than 10 years of something that even remotely looks like a democracy, right? Whereas we in the United States have had a stable system of government since, okay, what? Not get too up in arms about the Civil War because we won the Civil War, but what? That's 250 years of us being one, having a single political culture that's extremely cultivated. And now even with the Putin generation, I mean, my God, these kids that are 18 years old now were born in 2007. So there's no conditioning ingrained in them for civil resistance or the development of civil society, and partially okay, like they haven't had a lot of opportunities to do that. But that's kind of a separate discussion, is, you know, at what point do that really just break down? And it breaks down in the individual level first.
Yeah.
I mean, like the thing on the screen, just it's Russia's frighteningly fascist youth. I don't know, we can get into Navalny here shortly, but like, interestingly, I saw a post on Reddit, like Reddit ask Ru, which is like just ask Reddit only in Russian. And there were some foreigners like, why don't Russian people like to talk about politics? And there was a bunch of Russians on there that were like, we don't want to talk about politics with you, is when we get into that.
Oh.
And throughout the slew of those answers, I never saw one person even on Reddit, right? Like, these people could be outside of Russia. I never saw one person even say something like, it's because we're uncomfortable discussing the obviously horrible political situation that we live in that is oppressive and, you know, has caused generations of suffering, not only to ourselves, but to all of our neighbors. Like, none of that. It's just, you know.
Wow.
But they would gladly discuss politics in the States, for example.
True. Okay, so zombification concept. So, you know, to the earlier point about a lot of the young people, you know, being really kind of pro, you know, Putin and you know, war, and, you know, taking the narrative that the war in Ukraine had to happen or is a good thing. Seems like there's some dissent, but not mass protests, and, you know, not any kind of real attempt at stopping a Prigozhin in the, you know, one day bolt was about it. But, you know, the idea that we have this, you know, one narrative from the top that everyone believes, and if you don't, you know, you are the, you know, the nail that sticks out gets hammered back in, right? So the idea that if you don't go along with it, if you don't subscribe to the propaganda, drink the Kool-Aid that they're putting out, that there's something wrong with you. And we see that in other autocratic and, I would say, even totalitarian countries, certainly North Korea, who's probably closer to, you know, a totalitarian country than Russia, I suppose you can describe as an autocracy, but heading toward there, I suppose. So, you know, state media, one narrative is very effective in creating that.
Interesting. Yeah. Sorry, there's a lot of latency on my end. Interesting point, though, about the North Korea thing. This is not a situation where the situation in Russia is A and the situation outside of Russia is B, where I think we see with North Korea, for example, the people that are in North Korea obviously indoctrinated, obviously zombified, no matter what age group, demographic they apply to. They're either, you know, not aware of the system that they live in, or they're aware of it completely and totally. Well, everybody's complicit, right? But everybody's, you know, there's different degrees of complicity. Whereas people that are outside North Korea and get out, they are, you know, they understand what was back there. They understand that it is a cruel regime, that, you know, it's very smart that South Korea has instruments and mechanisms for those people to come over and live new lives. With the Russia thing, you can get the zombies everywhere. Which is rough. It's not a, oh, well, they're in Russia, therefore they're indoctrinated, but I see a Russian walking around in New York and therefore fine. So no. That's not the case. It's a much more subtle thing. It's not only this latest generation zombification, it's something inherent about Russianness which we need to crack open at some point. But I think that's the case. I don't know of any other country where it's. Most of the countries like that I know of are cults that are cult, like, you know, whether it's not even a country, it's North Korea, whether it's people that got out of China, whether it's people that you know, even people that got out of the Amish, people that got out of this cultish system. They're very aware of the fact that they're on the outside looking in. They need to assimilate to something better because they understand the system for what it is. Whereas it's hard for me to think of another country where the zombification comes with you, no matter where you go, no matter where you live. Right? People that live in the States for 25 years that are zombified. People that live in Germany for 2 generations, 3 generations that are zombified.
Isn't that the perfect description of the concept of the Russian world? Because it sounds like they just believe in it, and no matter what. This is the Russian world. They spread it through church, TV, things they call culture, which is also a very big question. Which is, what is Russian culture? I still don't understand the notion. I'm just like, not because I'm trying. It's not a sarcastic expression. I really don't see it.
Laced shoes and fish soup, fish. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So then, you know, to that point, how do they hide their Russianness? So, you know, if you're a Russian abroad, and I would say you're probably more likely, although not necessarily, probably stronger correlation between Russians who are abroad and those who have dissenting views of their government, right? So you might feel, you know, more free to express your opinion depending on where you are. And so, you know, what we've seen, especially since 2022, is a lot of kind of, I think a good example is around where I live, a lot of stores that were Russian are now generically Eastern European and carry maybe more Ukrainian products. And it's especially funny when you see the words that used to be on the building and you can still see where it said Russian. And I've seen signs too that say, you know, we, you know, send X amount of dollars to Ukraine, but you still hear Russian being spoken in those stores. So I always think that's kind of funny. But yeah, you know, it's the idea of being ashamed or embarrassed or, you know, not wanting anything to do with what's going on, right? Especially, again, the narrative that's changed in the last 3 years. So you'll have 2, I guess, types or situations where, you know, Russians who have been abroad for years and years, and then those who had left more recently, you know, in the last couple of years because of the, you know, violence, fear of conscription, brain drain that we talked about earlier. And so
Coca-Cola refugees.
Totally.
They're sometimes referred to. Yeah, so they're sometimes referred to the people that once they couldn't go to McDonald's anymore, they decided that was the breaking point.
I like that.
That's why they call them Coca-Cola refugees.
Go abroad. Yeah, I hadn't heard that term, but I think that's pretty funny. But yeah, you know, you try and get more involved in the dominant culture, and you know, I think a lot of the countries that I think the top countries that we saw people flee to initially were like those bordering Russia, you know, some like to Kazakhstan and Georgia and the Baltics and things like that. So, you know, you make some attempt, I suppose, to, you know, hide your Russianness and
why?
Change language.
Why?
Huh?
Why? This is the key question is why, right?
Persecution.
Okay, but you're outside your country, like own it. But what's the harm? Like you're saying with the sign in the Eastern European store, why you could just say like, look, here's the war. We do not support it. We do not believe in this. We understand this is evil. We love our brother nations. We send X dollars per month. Here's a printout of the financials that we send to Ukraine. Have you ever seen anything like that? Ever? Like taking just a basic moral stance on something that your government or culture or people have done that is evil. I've not seen it personally.
I don't think so.
But I don't live in the States as much as you guys do. Whereas, like, what's the issue? Like, Steven, do you have an issue saying that we shouldn't have allowed Pinochet to come to power in the United States? Do you have any moral qualms with saying that was a bad idea?
I think it is a bad idea. No, I don't.
Exactly. So why was that hard?
Yeah.
Was that hard? Saying that our government did something wrong?
Right. But it's
why?
It's interesting.
It's the inferiority complex. I think partially ties in. There's Have we talked about that
But
lately?
guys, you're talking about your government did something wrong. You see, this is already like the like a conversation with like some political cultural narrative that exists in your country. Russians would never say that something is going wrong with their government. The decision was wrong. They will tell to your face that something is wrong with your government.
Right.
Yeah, but they
And this is
complain.
the important thing.
Okay, but they'll complain about stuff. You have a point.
Yeah,
though.
they complain, but they will not connect it with the government doing or with their doing as the like citizens that elected the government.
Right. Exactly.
Because they don't have this tradition when they have like a discussion, that then they have election, that they have like outcome of their like vote, and they think we should figure out something else. It's not how it works.
Exactly.
Like, because Russia has never been a democracy. That's period. Like it's
Sure.
not about like me being Ukrainian saying that. Like it's just fact. We cannot change it. They have a chance still.
Do they?
Well, consider it as the like fantasy where we don't know what is Russian inside of Russia.
Okay, but
You can like point some republics inside of Russia, but you cannot even draw a line where is Russia inside of Russia.
I mean, there's a non-zero chance that pigeons will fly out of my butt over the course of this call. So I mean, I can't say there's an absolute 0% chance, but I would certainly not bet money on it. Like,
well, with some countries going like independent, like Tatarstan.
Well, okay, but when that happens, that'll be glorious to watch. First off, can I do a quick aside? It's very important for listeners to understand that Russians have this weird tendency, like Artem is saying, to reassign blame externally in a very specific way. The individual is never to blame because the individual has no responsibility, because all of the weight of the things going wrong rests with the local governance. The local governance, which is usually extremely corrupt, is the source of all the problems. And the person above the local governments, which is the national governments, which in this case is Putin, solves all of the problems. So there is this weird fallacy that they have where, well, there was a big dam that broke like a year and a half ago, and a whole city got flooded, and it would cost almost nothing to fix it. Like the cost of one single, I want to say X-55 cruise missile, which get thrown at Ukraine by the dozens every month. And no one says a word about the fact that Putin has started the war and continues the war and sends these missiles en masse, as opposed to taking these funds and distributing them throughout the poor areas of Russia, which all of Russia is poor except for Moscow, basically, and St. Petersburg. What they all did is they looked at the local mayor, who was in Dubai at the time in a brand new apartment that he had bought with his corruption money, and they appealed to Putin to remove that mayor. This is how completely nonsensical this is. There's the causality is just completely upside down, right? The water in Flint, Michigan is not Trump's fault. The water in Flint, Michigan is not Biden's fault. I don't know. Americans have this sense of, we should know our state and local reps better, but we at least know who they are and we vote on those things because those things matter, and Americans get that.
True.
But in Russia, it's the opposite. Don't know why. Well, I do know why. Like Artem said, they no democratic culture.
So to qualify as a good Russian, what does that entail? Right. We talked about kind of Russians abroad and being ashamed and, trying to hide their identity for the most part. So are all Russians supportive of Putin in the war? Well, certainly not. And again, you're probably going to see more who are opposed to the war, maybe before the invasion began, and saw the writing on the wall. Probably could go back before 2014 and then shortly after Putin came into power. So a lot of the Russians abroad certainly have different reasons for leaving and being abroad, but is there an intrinsic connection that they have by being Russian that you can never fully disassociate with? I think that's the question, regardless of kind of your, perspective. If you're, ethnically Russian, have Russian heritage, can you totally, yeah, go ahead. And I'm just posing.
You said that all Russian. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I do not think that all Russians are ashamed. I think there is a wide swath of Russians that hide who they are because they understand that it's socially or economically distasteful to be Russian right now. And in lieu of making steps in what I would say is a cognizant, civilly and morally responsible Christian, Judeo-Christian moral direction, and by taking steps to own what you are and what has happened and what you are and those around you are complicit in, they just hide and they change their names and they create shell companies in the United States, right? My previous job, we had a company that was all Russians, and it's exactly what they did. They changed all their names on LinkedIn to make them look German, or like American. Which is, it's very easy, right? If your name is like, Mikhail Koldakovsky or something like that, Koldov, maybe something more obviously Russian. On LinkedIn, you could be, Mike K. Mike K could be anybody. We don't know who this is, right? And only if you look down and you see, oh, this person studied at, Moscow State University, do you see what's actually going on here? Why would they feel the need to hide their name? Why would they feel the need to withhold information when they can just own it? But yeah, I don't think the Russians are all ashamed. I think a lot of them are. Okay, I have a counter question. How much of a protest is the "say no to war" idea? Like peace.
Where?
Go ahead. Go ahead. I don't know. Anyway, say no to war.
Where?
Say no.
In Russia, zero. That's too late, because the society has been adapted to the fact that they're operating on like foreign territory, and they justify it for different like target audience. They justify it with God, with their like great future for Russians, and they have to do, because for some of them it's a holy war.
True.
And a fraction of normal Russians probably fight on Ukrainian side and some Russian volunteer battalions.
Probably.
But protests will never happen. And I'm saying never because there is no political tradition like to express like and to deliver that society disagrees with something. There is no way to deliver a message that society is not fine with something, because the government doesn't care. Government is not elected.
They had 25 years. They had 25 years to see all of this happen. Like if you go to the previous slide, Stephen, I think that's a legitimate thing. That's the one with the dude holding the blank piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that gets you arrested for how long? Holding a blank piece of paper.
Right?
Yeah. Like your life is over if you step outside
usually it's like
and
14
hold the
days.
piece of paper up.
Oh, yeah.
That only furthers my
That's a good point.
Like they could all be doing this, but they don't.
It does.
Because it's they let it get away.
All right.
I mean, they did, like, for whatever you want to call it, they let it get away. So now that, I wonder what by percentage. I think the Russian police force is mostly riot police, and that just exists to keep the civilians off the streets and compliant.
Sure.
But
yeah,
how do you regain it at this point? How do you go? Like Artem said, they're not even elected. So why did the government in any form, at any level, have to listen to the will of the people? There's no opportunity for that to ever gather. All right.
No. All right. Okay.
But
so kind
back
of
to the original question of, what is the stop war? How much of a protest is that?
Yeah, I was gonna say not.
Like in a Big Short, like zero chance. It's not gonna happen.
Okay, I agree. It's a nothing peacenik argument that only exists to make the person look good on social media, but really it just reveals a complete lack of moral character.
Well, and speaking of making someone look good, just to shift gears a little bit, like Navalny is kind of like a prominent example of someone who had been hailed internationally for his anti-Putin stance, and very publicly went back there, and I think was in jail for not all that long before he ended up, maybe 2 years or so before he ended up essentially being killed, I would kind of think, or subject to whatever conditions. But does that mean he was this leader of this resistance? Well, not really, right? And so you have to our points here, go further into his past and look. But that's just an example of a narrative, right? That there's this person or this movement that is vocally opposed to Putin, but that doesn't mean he was pro-Ukraine and anti-war and all of that. So it's more nuanced, I think, but I'm curious what you all think.
Okay, so
Yeah. Go ahead.
so it's probably like a bigger topic about Navalny, and we'll refer to it like more and more in the future. But like speaking of the West and opposition to Kremlin, the West didn't have much of choice to whom he can he can talk about something that's going on in Russia. So it doesn't mean that Navalny was pro-Western. He was in opposition to Putin. He was not. It was not about democracy. He was again like Navalny was about Navalny, not about like poor Russians or like corruption. Corruption was a nice thing. Corruption was the tool to deliver the message that something is wrong with the current government, and it's in their power to fix it somehow through like election. But corruption was a tool. Corruption wasn't the purpose to fight for or against, because Navalny became also a tool for Kremlin to fool Westerners.
Mm-hmm.
Because when people like in Washington and Berlin would think about the like opposition, like in Moscow, they would think about Navalny, who did all the like right thing, like in the eyes of the democracies. For example, the election, he went to election for mayor of Moscow. So this is like legitimate, like honest, like goal that he tried to execute. He failed, but everyone sees in him some figure that can be supported by like a small fraction of the population. He wasn't very popular. He didn't have like he didn't have a party in the parliament even, because if you are a real opposition, probably some part of society should support you. And if we just assume that there is not enough people out of 140 million to support like a small party to go to federal government, federal parliament, so something is wrong probably.
Interjecting here very quickly, Artem's point is extremely valid. Judicial and other legal barriers that were thrown up in order to hinder. However, we come back to the same argument of, if this person was a messianic figure to overthrow all of Putin's evil and corruption, then, what happened to the protest movement at all stages? Why are the people still not taking down to the streets? There were protests, way back in the day, I think. I don't think any of those movements materialized in any reasonable way because, to Artem's point, they were unorganized, which is bizarre unless you look at it the way that Navalny being a tool to validate some degree of relationship to the West. Best evidenced maybe now by his wife, who is unable to denounce even and the basic evils of this bitch won Hollywood. She went and was lauded by all of our starlets and stuff like that, which is disgusting to watch. And this person can't even say that Putin is waging a war. She can't say very simple stuff like that, and it sounds insignificant. You're just a sheep, and sheep are also complicit in horrible loot, like taking power and executing. How much humanitarian aid has she gathered? Absolutely nothing. And she has
But they made a movie about it.
So,
yeah.
She got an Oscar. What is she doing with it? Nothing.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's not propaganda. This is what it is. So, depending on kind of the Russia apologists who are spreading disinformation, it happens a lot in the Republican Party in the U.S. who have been opposed to giving further aid to Ukraine. And I think one thing that I have heard that, is kind of the dollar amount that keeps coming up, in the news, in debates, where, I've heard the misconception that it's kind of like a blank check, where it's really a, total cost of the value of the hardware that is being sent in. Artem and I were briefly talking about that before we started. A lot of the hardware has been sitting in storage, and it's not the latest generation of equipment that we have that's being sent over there. For example, I believe they had been receiving some F-16s and
Not from us.
well, correct, because the F-16 is a fairly older fighter now, and the F-35 is replacing it. So I think it was like Slovakia and other countries, maybe Poland, I believe, who were getting
Oh,
newer, U.S. developed Boeing and Lockheed Martin, and all the innovation for that, is I think a joint effort between the U.S. and Europe, but they're not
Yeah.
independently developing these fighters, so they're getting F-16s, which is still better. I don't know what Russia uses, if they still use MiGs or if they use something
serious.
different.
No,
But yeah, go ahead.
Am I still here? Oh God.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can.
Okay, so the F-16 era fighters that are given to Ukraine, so that we all understand, are so old that they were old. These are things that are about as old as the first Top Gun movie. That's how old these things are. Specifically, the ones that are shooting down Su-35s, which is by comparison a much newer plane with a much better range, much better maneuverability, and superior munitions capacity in every single feasible way. But like the Netherlands have these old 1980s era F-16AMs sitting around that they facilitated the sale and training to Ukraine with American pilots. And they use a missile on that old ass F-16 that we don't even use anymore. We have the AM-7, and we've completely phased that out for AMRADs. But this is so like the whole point in the end game again for Ukraine aid is you give the Ukrainians the really old garbage, and that cleans out the storehouses so that our American industry creates new stuff that we use, or our allies buy new stuff from us, which either way, means a win-win for us. Like this is why like you're saying, Steve, with the blank check thing, it's like $500 Brazilian, $350 Brazilian. It's debt. It's not debt. It's 100 billion. It's 60 billion. Like no one, we know exactly how much it is. It's 121 billion dollars.
Right. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Exactly.
Europe has given more in everything. In every single category, Europe has given more, and Europe gets so much less back. Europe has almost no benefit from giving Ukraine aid other than like the moral soft power thing. And that's my end of my rant. Just wanted to point that out.
And it's also building on top of that, it's not a capacity issue. I think take, for example, the Abrams tanks, right? The A2s, I think, are those what was sent to Ukraine? They're all made in a particular factory in Ohio by General Dynamics, and I think there's currently like 4,500 in the U.S. in military use or inventory, and 31, I think 30 of them had been sent to Ukraine, and I heard, you all might know, 1 or 2 had been destroyed. I'm not totally sure, but that's just an example of hardware that had been sent there, and the idea that there's not enough or that we're running out is ridiculous. And again, I think the Abram, the A2s are much better than anything Russia has, even at their highest level. It's a pretty advanced tank, and I think we have the Abrams X is right around the corner, which is kind of the partially hybrid battery powered tank with AI systems that's not put into use yet, but they showed it off at one of those weapons conventions. So again, we are not about to run out of things. And another thing, kind of disinformation I've heard is, in terms of Ukraine's capability to continue fighting, I don't think it's a problem with the population. I think they have enough people, but not enough weapons, is kind of what I had heard too. Whereas Russia is more of a people issue, getting people to fight, and that's why they keep doing these conscriptions and changing the draft laws. So that's another narrative that I had heard different things about. But yeah,
there's a great video that came out in April where the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe of the United States of America Joint Chiefs of Staff is interrogated by American sitting senators, and he describes everything on the battlefield that's going on right now between Russia and Ukraine to a T. People ask him very straightforward questions. Maybe we should just link this in the description because this guy, the general, gives great answers. It's like, is Ukraine losing this war? And the Supreme Allied Commander says, no, Ukraine is not. Russia is exhibiting increasingly degraded capacity to support its own scaled up military efforts, whereas Ukraine is constantly innovating new ways to attrite, however you pronounce that, a numerically superior but logistically inferior enemy. Right? Is Ukraine going to fail? Is fold if U.S. aid gets withheld? Again, no. Right? We see the U.S. aid gets paused. There's a lot of defensive weapons like the Patriot systems and the anti-drone missiles, which just means that more civilians die, largely speaking. These defensive munitions are used, I think, less often and closer to the front because the front is mostly plagued by things that you can't shoot out of the sky, like these unglided aerial glide bombs, things of that nature. So it's a great video, and there's no way that you can look at things like 1 million reported Russian casualties, 1 million in 3 years. That's just KIA. That's not even if you include the wounded. Things like I've never, and again, maybe Artem, you should chime in with this one specifically as well, because you're better versed than I think both of us are in the way that Putin talks about things. But Putin's recent announcement about things going bad is something that is extremely uncharacteristic. And there's even Russian military bloggers that are at the point of saying, if the Russians launch an offensive in the summer, which is the last opportunity to do it, because when the fall mud hits, they won't be able to advance anymore. If the Russians do launch a summer offensive, this is the last one. Their economy cannot support this anymore at the rate that they're burning through absolutely everything, including manpower, labor, infrastructure. The price of oil is down low. 30 to 40% of their budget right now is dedicated to this military thing. So the war machine is shaking apart as we see it. And yet the Ukrainians are still here. How many times have we heard that Ukraine's going to fall if X thing happens? Right? It hasn't happened, and it never will happen. They're culturally never going to give up. You cannot win this war.
Just impossible. You need to kill all of Ukrainians. That's how you take the country.
Correct. Whereas, when we saw that one day, Stephen, to your point, hilariously, thank you for bringing this up. On the one day that Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of Wagner, turned around and started driving back into Russia, the locals were like, woo, yeah, time for a change. Get in there. Go tell them. You know what I mean? So this is, compare those two things. Right? An old Ukrainian woman coming out in front of a Russian tank with her arms and pushing it and telling it to stop and fuck off back to Russia. Whereas, Russians that claim to love Putin, as soon as somebody slightly more relevant seems to come on the scene, they're like, yeah, go get him. Sure, you'll do. Be worse.
Right.
Which is another fallacy that they keep falling into for some reason.
True.
But that's a whole nother thing.
Seriously. That's a whole other. And then, of course, you have, other Russian disinformation, again, kind of spinning the narrative. RT and Sputnik are Russia. Those are not state-sponsored. Are those private companies that kind of are more international news coming out of Russia, like Russian news agencies that are not run by the Kremlin? Is that right?
I wouldn't say so about RT. So I think it's a governmental.
Like a state sponsor. Okay.
Yeah, state sponsor.
So they're, just printing whatever the Kremlin tells them to. I'm not as familiar with Sputnik, if you two might know more about that. But yeah, I wouldn't put too much emphasis into Russian news outlets. There's not a whole lot of, dissent or, other than the state narrative.
So like I'm back, baby.
It's a much clearer picture.
Google-fi anymore.
Back into the
What I
game.
miss?
We were talking about, I don't know if you know much about Sputnik. I was saying that RT, I guess, is an official government-run news agency.
Yes.
But Sputnik is like another, I guess, private or news outlet. I don't know much about Sputnik.
I don't think there's anything private in Russia.
Oh,
Probably
Truly
like
private.
everything government, like state backed.
oh,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
So there's that the numbers I found was just from that's a good episode of Vatnik Soup.
Oh, yeah.
Incidentally, there's a guy. I put the link at the end, but it's this guy that's just a disinformation, and not even just Russian disinformation. It's also Chinese disinformation and other Middle East information. But he's an expert out of Europe,
Okay.
and he's still saying things like a conservative estimate. 80% of the EU-based information operations that happen are conducted by Russia.
Mm,
Which, if you do the math on that, that means Russia carries out 4 times more information operations by volume than everybody else combined
wow.
in Europe.
Jeez.
This is insane levels of, this
That's
is unthinkably
insane.
high levels of
Yeah.
sophisticated
Seriously.
hybrid warfare.
Jeez.
And over half in the United States, which,
Wow.
we see that every day. And
Yeah.
where we're at right now, the tenant media scandal is yet unresolved, but that's, I need to stop saying, that's a filler word that I use. That is people that I even used to watch before they completely went off the deep end.
Sure.
People like Dave Rubin, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
People that were just, when they started out earlier, they were kind of just more conservative voices and they weren't open bigots.
Sure.
But now or people like Tim Pool,
Oh, yeah.
who got
Another one.
$100,000 per episode to shit on Ukraine, pardon my French, and lie about Ukraine. And now he's in the White House press pool and the Associated Press is not.
How did that happen?
Well, they got paid.
I got paid. That's true. So, what are kind of the goals of this? I mean, Russia's been very, again, if you think about propaganda, just the narrative that resonates outside of Russia, they're being very proactive to try and control that, right? With disinformation, with, having a presence, you just made a great point, actually, they're paying attention to who is, sympathetic or kind of maybe neutral and, well, how can we spin that, get them more on our side, I need to look up his name, but there was someone who was being confirmed for I believe it was like a civilian undersecretary position who was not able to say if Russia had invaded Ukraine. This is a little earlier this year. I'll have to find that video, but at a Senate confirmation hearing was just not willing to acknowledge, just couldn't say that Russia was the aggressor and being grilled by Democrats. But anyway,
Rubio can't even say that. So
that's true too. Yeah.
The guy that staffs most of the White House aides is likely a Russian spy from Malta.
Yeah.
So come on.
Yeah.
From Malta, big air quotes. They have that. They have a gold card. That's why, because you can pay them money to become a EU citizen.
Oh yeah, the Golden Visa program. That's right.
Yep, the EU sanctioned the hell out of them for that. But
didn't Cyprus do that?
Another Russian hobble.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
$2 million gets you a residency card. All right.
Oh yeah, or they just make this really ridiculously low requirements for like land ownership or something like that.
That's right. It's very easy. Okay. All right. So kind of defense kind of recap here. So, a lot of the stories that come out of, firsthand accounts, like, are those being propagated much? So being able to connect with the specific story of someone who, had been to the front line, had, let's say, incurred an injury, those narratives are going to be pretty powerful, I think, than hearing, statistics and if that were, and I just haven't seen a whole lot of that, but maybe more on Ukrainian media. I don't know if like 1+1 is kind of featuring the accounts from the soldiers and veterans coming back from the front line. That would go a long way, I think, in terms of storytelling and it's people we know in the community especially outside of Ukraine too. Here, I think that would make a big difference. I don't know. I'm not too much aware of that. Maybe you two are.
Regarding the
Kind of the telling, the sharing of firsthand accounts from soldiers and people who have been there. For example, being guests on news shows and being able to tell from like the ground perspective what's kind of happening, not just like a summary
Yeah.
or a statistics.
Gotcha. I think there's value in the pot. Like it's a teeter totter that's going one way. You either have the Ukrainian narrative that needs to be lifted, or you need the Russian narrative to be suppressed. And in
Mhm.
order to properly suppress the Russian narrative, it needs to be properly contextualized, because that's one of the main engines of how the Russian narrative even gets out, is that it gets out by getting around the truth.
Mhm.
So you can, I think, absolutely read about Ukrainian accounts of things. You can read about what's happening in Ukraine, and you understand that, Trump's spiritual advisor, right? Or that one pastor that is claims to be Trump's like spiritual
Yeah.
aide. He spent 17 seconds in Ukraine. He came back and said, "I was wrong about everything. There's no neo-Nazis here. This is God's war. This is black and white. We all need to support Ukraine unilaterally," right? This is a 5-minute
Mhm.
Google search that everybody can do for all this kind of stuff.
Mhm. Mhm.
We just live in this horrible age where everybody has a microphone, and nobody has any obligation to say anything truthful into the microphone. So we all have to take that onto ourselves. And if you see something like disinformation or something that smells like disinformation, Google it. If you find a multiple Western English language media outlets reporting the same thing, there's probably a percentage of truth in that. If you find one random dude on Twitter or a blog, no, ignore it. It's
Right.
likely just someone's getting paid, or just some useful idiot. And you shouldn't be on the internet to feel angry about things anyways. We do too much of that here. I do, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. Okay.
I know we got to wrap it up here so we can. What's the next ones there?
So just kind of, final thoughts, call to action. So, we've talked a bit about kind of differences in the narrative and the stories being, printed out of Russia, and what their local media is, which, is, as we know, very one-sided. But their attempt to control, I think, the narrative outside of Russia is interesting too, and how they make that happen. By we pay money, like, does it call sympathy to our effort?
It's not subtle either. It's
No,
really
it's not. Yeah, I would agree with that.
The people that they get to do it are either just terrible people. They're all like Megan's Law people. They can't live next to a school because of the nature of the Megan's Law conviction that they have, and they fled the country to get away from getting out of jail.
Right.
That's like Scott Ritter. There was that American former military guy that had a family that was facing the P-word charges that he got over there. Jackson Hinkle's probably right up there. All those types that, those ones are the actual Americans, so they're in the minority, because most of those voices are just random bots or people that are farmed in like Pakistan or India or Africa to do this kind of shit.
Right.
But they're not subtle. It's really just not.
No. Yeah. That's a good point.
Well, how many Marjorie Taylor Greens are there?
Yeah.
Right? There's only really one anymore.
True.
Because just no one can listen to her talk, because it's just, why would you even do it?
Exactly.
You're just gonna become stupider. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, right. So asking questions and knowing the source of where that information comes from is very important too. And when you hear from Americans, especially kind of on the right, who are pro-Russian or anti-supporting Ukraine, I wonder where that narrative comes from, because I don't think a lot of Americans probably have strong opinions one way or another. Again, a lot of the people who, like, I think of the MAGA base as, well, why would they be any more inherently supportive of Russia? Well, because they're being told that, right? There's misinformation about all this money, instead of going to taxpayers and schools and healthcare, it's going to, support Ukraine. So that causes that kind of warped perspective, and as we use the term, zombification, right? Oh yeah, that's what I've heard. I'm not going to vote for politicians who want to spend all our tax money over there. We need to fix things here.
And yet, here we are.
Here we go.
Could I marry the original question with the point that you
Yeah.
just made so we can wrap this up?
Yeah.
So when you have any kind of person that has forsaken rational, objective analysis of the world around them in favor of some perceived value, some faith-based aspect of their personality that's core to them,
Mm.
you're never going to win that argument. You're never going to convince that person, because it's the same kind of thing of just like walking up to a Christian trying to say, oh, God doesn't exist, right? It's just,
Right.
It's not, you can't come from the inverse of that argument and approach it in that way. This is the good Russian, I'm going to call it a paradox. I know one person in Lviv who is Russian,
Mm.
ethnically, born to Russian parents, came to Lviv when he was like 2-3 years old because of military service, because Lviv was flooded with NKVD people and Russian speakers throughout the Soviet Union because they liked the architecture. If you look up places like Chuprinka, where the locals were all taken out of their houses, but whatever. He does not know Russian. He
Mm.
only knows Ukrainian. He's denounced the family. He's denounced everything. He understands the whole situation. Lived in Ukraine Lviv his whole life. Speaks like a Lviv guy. Lives like a Lviv guy. Knows Lviv like the back of his hand. My question would then be, is that guy really Russian?
Mm.
That's the question. Because he doesn't have any kind of faith-based romanticism for his country of origin.
Mhm.
He doesn't have any kind of notionality of, oh, well, I was born in Russia, therefore I need to support Putin. Oh, well, the Crimea thing's complicated. Oh, well, hedging, stonewalling, omitting the truth, not saying what needs to be said. That does not. So, and I still don't know. I haven't landed on what a good Russian could be, because I still think it's like a Schrodinger's cat
Yeah,
kind of
it
thing.
is.
Artem, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, when you say that he was born in Russia, but like, come on, like you're from the United States, a country of immigrants. Like most of your citizens, like came from somewhere, so that they became Americans. So they came and they said like, well, we're Germans here, or we're like Mexicans or Spaniards here, so we're Americans. So the same happened to that dude. So it's politically he is Ukrainian, ethnically, and I don't know what it means right now these days, because like what the blood doesn't always correlate with the values the government of your country or origin like bears. So like what it means, like what is good Russian? Good Russian, it's the person who understands and like the acts accordingly, like acts along with the entire like West, or like just normal human being. But this is this is the point, like normal human being, it's something we already, like we pass it, we don't discuss it, so we discuss like anomalies.
Yes.
And in that like area, in the domain of anomalies, where we can, that's a good Russian. This is Russian opposition. This is Russian academia, because whatever they say, they're trying to like reflect the failure or like felonies of their own government. They're trying to engage you in the conversation when like you are your government or your beliefs are responsible for all the bad that is done, like on behalf of Russian state.
True.
And it's a very, again, you can check it very easily, right? All you got to do, find someone, ask them, who does Crimea belong to historically? Right?
Good point.
What happened in 2014? Was it a civil war? No. Right? Was Yanukovych overthrown in a CIA-backed coup that was also NATO somehow? No. Did the Ukrainian government bomb ethnic Russians exclusively in the Donbass 8 years since from 14 to 22? No. But the point is, as soon as you dig even like a half-inch deep into that layer, it'll become immediately clear what you are dealing with. A normal human being or a zombie? Some degree of zombification.
Yeah, exactly.
It's surprising. It sounds like almost like I don't even know how to put this, Steven. I don't, because I don't know how often you find them in the States. I don't know what your experience has been. For me, it is that level of aggression. They're not subtle about it. They get mad. They get, like you're saying, because they know maybe somewhere that what this is all wrong and it's all evil and stuff, but they're not gonna just do the basic thing. It's
right. Exactly.
This is all evil. This is all wrong. I denounce it unilaterally. I wash my
100%.
hands of it. I
Sure.
do not pay taxes to the Russian government. I do
Right.
not buy Russian-sponsored products. I do not propagate this shit. I do
Mhm.
not cut ties with all these people. Anything that you would have to do if you and your family were involved in some kind of sort of massive tyrannical, biblical cartoon evil. But I don't see that. And
Right.
I've never seen it personally.
That's true.
could
Yeah. I don't know.
It can't be that hard.
Can't be that. No. Absolutely not.
Good or bad Russian, like in any way, like they're like children
Mhm.
somehow always end up in the Western countries.
Oh yeah, of course. Who wants to live there?
True.
Western countries
agree.
have toilets.
Well,
It's true.
It's like 35% of Russian homes don't have running water.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, it's nothing but a giant. Look at where the population, how the population is distributed.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Imagine what that number goes down to if you exclude Moscow.
Sure.
Like the distribution is probably insane.
I would think
It's
you're right.
probably like
yeah.
90s. You know? So
Alrighty. Here, let me. All right. Well, that was good. Here, I can stop the recording.
thanks everybody.